Hello. If you just happened across this video and you don't know who I am, my name is Karina Fitch, and I am a midwife, I am a mother, and I am a matrescence guide. And I came in today to talk a bit about this word that I've been throwing around that I'm going to call the M word and why it's important. And I want to start by talking about a different word, which is adolescence. So adolescence is a word that we all know, and we know it because if we're adults, we've been through that process. But even before we went through that process, we had probably heard of it because it's something that is spoken about, and it refers to all of the changes that we experience as we're going through puberty and moving into adulthood. And so those include brain changes, right? Our brain is making all sorts of new neural connections. It's a time of increased neuroplasticity, which just means that there's a lot of capacity to adapt in the brain, to learn new things, to make new connections. We also experience hormonal changes and physical changes, psychological changes. And so, because as a culture, we have named this process, and because we have named it, we can do our best to support it. So that includes things like, sitting down and talking to our kids before they're going through that process to let them know what they might experience. It might also include education in the school around health and puberty and what to expect. There's a similar word that speaks to all of the changes that we experience when we become a mother, and that word is matrescence. And matrescence, you can see it has the similar root as adolescence. And so it refers to all of these same changes. When we become mothers, our brain changes. Actually, one of the very first signs that you're pregnant are these brain changes. So before you could pee on a stick and know that you're pregnant because of the hormones in your urine, you could get an MRI of the brain and see that you were pregnant, which to me is just really fascinating because it means that from that moment of conception, practically, our bodies, our brains are starting to change and adapt to this new role. So it also involves hormonal changes, right? We all know pregnancy is full of hormones, and the postpartum period, lots of changes there. There are also psychological changes. Our psyche is expanding. We're starting to think about what kind of mother we want to be, even if it's not our first time, because each and every time that we have a baby, we start this process over and over again. There are also physical changes, clearly, right? Our body literally changes form. Our breasts get bigger, our belly expands, our hips widen, our butt gets very full. Lots and lots of physical changes, and we experience all sorts of physical symptoms when we're pregnant. There are also spiritual changes, to hold life, to bring life into the world, and to nurture life is a very deeply spiritual experience. We experience social changes, right? Our social circles may shift. If we were in a group of friends that didn't have any kids and still don't have kids, we might start to gravitate toward another group of folks that do have children. No matter what happens in that childbearing year, our social life is going to change and adapt. There are economic changes, right? Having a child is not cheap. We need extra finances to support that child. So the changes that happen in matrescence are multifaceted and very powerful and life-changing. And so the reason that this word is so important to understand is because without understanding it, there's an experience of just feeling like things are happening to you, and it can feel very disempowering and overwhelming. And we want mothers to have a different kind of experience. So matrescence is a word that I, even as a midwife, only learned about 5 years ago now. So how do we possibly support a process that is unnamed and therefore invisible? And the answer is that we can't, and we aren't. And this word, matrescence, was coined by an anthropologist, Donna Raphael, back in the 1970s. And yet here we are 50 years later. And my guess is that most of you watching this video have never heard of this word. Or if you have, it's something very new. So one of my goals in life is to make this a household word, just like adolescence, so that there is an awareness. When there's an awareness, there is the capacity to support this process. And as a midwife, my experience in watching this process over and over again, I've been providing care for pregnant people since the 1990s. It is a profound, life-changing process, and it is a process that is 10 times more intense than adolescence. And guess what? It never ends. Okay, I'm here to tell you that it never ends. My oldest is 16. My youngest is 6.5. And, each time you have a child, again, you're going to start this season again, this process again. And because our children are constantly going through these developmental stages, we also have to adjust and shift our mothering. So, and I really believe that part of the reason that we are seeing epidemic amounts of shame, guilt, depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar disorder within the motherhood space, this is a direct result, I believe. Of course, there are this is a multifaceted issue. There's many, many reasons for this, but I think one of the underlying reasons is that what we're seeing is the result of a society and a culture that is under supporting matrescence. We've taken on so much guilt, so much of this sense of not enoughness, and we hold ourselves to a very, very high standard, this sort of idealized mother standard that nobody can attain. Nobody that's human, at least, can attain. And so mothers across the board suffer from this sense of not enoughness, and then we kind of buckle down and try harder, thinking that it's something that's wrong with us. It's something that's inherently wrong with us, and that if we just try harder, we will reach that idealized mother place. And so we've taken on what is actually the failings of our culture, right? We live inside of a patriarchal culture that has us believing and buying into this idea that we've failed, that we're not enough, and that we should feel guilt, and we should feel shame if we're having any other experience of motherhood other than complete bliss. So it is crucial that we understand this word. It is crucial that we understand the cycles of it. There are stages to matrescence. There are seasons to matrescence. And I really think that, all of the things that we're seeing in terms of maternal mental health, because we are in a crisis, okay? The number one complication of pregnancy is perinatal mood disorders. So that means depression, that could be anxiety, it could be bipolar, OCD, either during the pregnancy or in the postpartum period. And I believe that what we're experiencing, these mood disorders, are actually a really normal response to a culture that is not supporting us, okay? Because matrescence is a process that requires guidance. It requires support. And I think there's this idea that when we become a mother, it's the end of ourselves as people. Really, what it is an invitation into a profound transformation. It's an invitation to becoming ourselves fully. Because what we know right now in terms of the brain changes that happen, and we're just at the very beginning of understanding this, because of course it wasn't something that science cared about, that science wanted to study up until very recently. But what we know is that there are two main changes that happen in the brain. The first one is that oxytocin, which you may or may not have heard of, it is the love hormone. It's the hormone of connection, of maternal-infant bonding. It's the hormone of intimacy. It's the hormone that we release when we make love, when we have an orgasm, or just when we're engaged in platonic cuddling and touch. So oxytocin is really like the bond, the glue that holds parents and children together, holds families together, holds communities together, holds the world together. And what we know now is that oxytocin plays a huge role in the postpartum period. And this shows up and is commonly referred to as mommy brain or baby brain, and often gets a bad rap as us being just really forgetful and spacey or kind of dumber than normal. But what it's really doing is that it increases our capacity for empathy. It increases our capacity to read nonverbal cues. Now, obviously, this is hugely important when you're dealing with a newborn and even young children up to the point where they can communicate verbally. Most of their communication is going to be nonverbal, right? It also makes us more tolerant of monotony. This is also hugely important because if you think about what it is to be a mother, especially in that first year of life, there's a lot of monotony, right? We're feeding our babies, we're changing diapers, and we're repeating that over and over, basically. So it's a lot of monotony, and oxytocin helps us to be okay with that. It also makes us more ambitious, and it makes us better able to multitask. Again, hugely important when you're a mom, especially if you have more than one child and you're holding other roles, which we all do, right? So there's a purpose in these brain changes. It's making us ready and putting us in the best position to be in the role of caretaking a young human. However, the other thing about oxytocin is that in an environment, well, it makes us more vigilant, more protective, right? Which is important when there is a threat. So many, many years ago, when people were becoming mothers, they had to be on alert for wild animals. They had to make sure that their infant was safe. And that is an instinct that is still very, very strong in us. And oxytocin amplifies that. And so in an environment where we don't feel safe and supported, what that means is that oxytocin can push us over the edge of vigilance and into anxiety. And actually, postpartum anxiety is more common than postpartum depression. So this is why support is crucial. The other big change in the brain, so we have the oxytocin. The second big change is that we become highly neuroplastic. And there are different stages within the human lifespan where we are more neuroplastic. For example, in the first year of life, right? Newborns and babies are just, their brain is just like firing new connections all the time. It's exploding in all the connections it's making, and there's so much learning going on. That happens again in adolescence. It happens again in our early 20s, and it happens again when you become a mother, every single time. And so it's really powerful, and it opens up so much possibility for growth and expansion, but it can also feel very, very disorienting, right? It's kind of like when you download or you do an upgrade on your operating system on your computer, and then you can't figure out where anything is. Everything seems confusing. It can feel like that, especially in those first postpartum hours and days. So never fear. It's all purposeful, and it will become less disorienting over time. But having a good guide through this process can make a huge difference as to whether or not your experience of matrescence is empowering or disempowering, whether it leaves you feeling lost, scattered, insecure, or whether it leaves you feeling like totally on purpose, on fire, expanded, right? So when we think about transformation, one of the first things that often pops to my mind is the butterfly, right? The butterfly is like this classic symbol of transformation. And how does the caterpillar become the butterfly, right? It doesn't just eat good foods and read a lot of self-help books to become the butterfly. No, it goes into the chrysalis. It completely changes form, right? So it goes inside the chrysalis, and inside that chrysalis, the cells of the caterpillar literally turn into this kind of primordial mush, undefined, just raw material. And that's often how it feels in those early postpartum days. We're just really raw, we're really vulnerable, we're really amorphous. We're in this liminal space between who we were and who we're becoming. And the chrysalis is what provides that safe container to do the deep work that allows that mush to form into a butterfly and to emerge from the chrysalis. So I want to tell you a secret. For humans, the chrysalis is the village, right? We have all heard the old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. Okay, those are not empty words. And I like to say it takes a village to raise a mother, because not only do we need the practical support of, help with other children, house care, child care, all that stuff that we need on a practical level, but we also need a village to help us step into this new identity. We need a village of emotional support, and not just any village, right? Because in our larger culture, as women, we have been socialized to relate in two main ways. One is that we often bond around our shared experience of victimization or oppression. And number two, we have been socialized to compete with each other. So I'm not saying that everyone is like this. We all have relationships with other women in our lives. We may or may not have strong sisterhoods, but I'm sure we all have experiences that are way more elevated than what I'm describing. But that is the sort of the paradigm that we live in. That's the underlying framework for how we've been socialized to relate. So it's very easy to fall back into those ways of relating. So what we need when it comes to matrescence is a very specific kind of village, a very specific kind of sisterhood that is aligned around our power and our possibility. So as one of my teachers, Dr. Claire Zammit, says, we cannot become ourselves by ourselves, right? We need each other both to point out the areas where we may need to grow and evolve, and to reflect back our light and our brilliance, because most of the time we can't see that ourselves. We don't see our gifts because they come so naturally to us that we just think that's just how it is and everyone has that. But no, our sisters can reflect that back to us. So in service to the village that we all need, I have created a virtual village called the Matrescence Circle. It started it's been a couple years now. So, 2021. Yeah, 2021, around this time of year, I started this. It's a membership group. We meet once a month for 2 hours. We explore different aspects of matrescence, and there are seasons, as I mentioned, there are cycles. We get into all that inside of the circle. And then we have, in between those sessions, we have a community of 24/7 support with everyone that's in the village. And I give 2 weekly prompts. One is a check-in day where I'll ask a specific question and everyone shares their answer. And the other one is a tune-in day, and that's a moon card reading. So if you are interested in checking it out, I do offer the first session free, the first month free, so you can get a sense of the community, fill it out, see if it feels like a good fit for you. And then it's an ongoing monthly fee. You can click on the link below this video and register, and just put in first month free in all caps at checkout as a coupon code, and you'll be all set. All right, I hope this was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you inside of the circle.